Hi, everybody. I'm Vladimir Duthier. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. There is a lot to get to. Here are the top stories we're following. President Trump focuses on the economy as he kicks off his next 100 days in office, but the new GDP numbers could put a damper on his message. Columbia University graduate Mahmoud Khalil remains in the United States and can stay here, at least for now. We're going to explain the new ruling in the case and what happens next. And overnight, new talks about a ceasefire as attacks in Ukraine intensify. The posturing from both Moscow and Kyiv as the Trump administration says it might walk away if a deal is not made soon. This is CBS News 24/7. We're going to start with some breaking news. New data coming out just as we come on the air shows that the U.S. economy shrank for the first time in 3 years. The gross domestic product, GDP, for the first quarter of the year is down 0.3%. Markets, of course, as you can imagine, have dropped on the news. This, of course, on the heels of the president's tariff plan and that ongoing trade war with China. So joining us right here in Studio 55 is CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly. Your first thoughts to these numbers?
Okay, so the fact that we have a decrease in growth, that is never good. This has only happened a handful of times over the past 10 years. A couple of those were in COVID. And remember, 2 negative quarters is how we traditionally define a recession, okay? So it's not good. We were still expecting it to be around 0.4%, but in the positive. And this is compared to normally over the past couple of years, quarterly growth of 2 to 3%. So that's not good. Here's the thing, though. What's driving this is a surge in imports, right? Everyone's trying to get ahead of the tariff deadline, whether you are a business or a consumer. And when they put GDP together, a surge in imports will drag on that number. So I was digging through the report before we got on, and core GDP, that's the number where they kind of strip out all of the imports, the exports. That was actually 3%. So to me, let's say over the next couple of quarters, you don't have that surge in imports because businesses are saying, well, there's tariffs now, we got ahead of it, we stockpiled. There's a possibility for a turnaround. The other two things, though, that I'm really interested about is consumer spending. It was still positive, but it was slowing. And remember, consumer spending drives 2/3 of GDP. So that's a little bit of a concerning metric. And then what does the Fed do, Vlad?
Right. Well, that's the question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the president has been pressuring Jerome Powell to do something. But of course, what we're seeing, these numbers reflect a self-inflicted downturn in the economy. We were on an upturn up until these tariffs went into effect. So that's an interesting point that you're making there, that if you dig behind the numbers, there's a silver lining in this cloud. Yeah. We just heard from the White House trade advisor, Peter Navarro. I saw him on the White House lawn just moments ago. Let's play a little bit of what he said, and I'll get your reaction to that.
This was the best negative print, as they say in the trade, for GDP I have ever seen in my life. It really should be very positive news for America. The way you calculate the gross domestic product is it's 4 drivers of GDP. It's consumption, investment, government spending, and what's called net exports. And when you have more imports than exports, you have a drag downward on the GDP. So you have to kind of calculate across the 4 components. So what happened with the numbers today is we had a fairly extraordinary surge of imports that was totally driven by the rest of the world trying to get their products in here before the tariffs took full hold. So the great news.
All right. So he's essentially saying what you said. Right. I mean, Peter Navarro is an old dude. I doubt that these are the best numbers he's ever seen in his life. Yeah. But the point that he's making is what you said earlier to us, which is this surge in imports has created this negative number in GDP growth. The question I have, though, Kelly, is, okay, so the idea would be that once that happens, that we start exporting to the rest of the world, and that number can potentially turn around. But who's going to buy our stuff? We don't make the kinds of things that the rest of the world wants. That's why generally we import more goods than we export, but not at the level that we've seen in the last couple of months since these tariffs have gone into effect. So can we potentially see a turnaround?
I mean, yes, but you bring up a very valid point. The other thing that I feel very concerned about is, okay, we're not going to have that import surge.
Yep.
But I go back to that consumer spending number. Yeah. Consumers spent a lot over the past couple of months because they were trying to get ahead of the tariff deadline. What happens if we don't have as much imports, but we have a downturn in consumer spending? That's going to drag on that number. And then the Fed, to that point goes, ooh, inflation might be going up, slow growth. We're going to be paralyzed. We're just going to hold.
So, and you're starting to see, this is anecdotal, so I'd be curious to know what your hard analysis has shown, but you're starting to see people posting on social media and sort of on Reddit talking about like for example, I'll give you an anecdote related to our life. We're redecorating our house, and some of the things that we bought are in the United Kingdom, and all of a sudden, we were just looking at the same item that we bought 6 months ago and how we got it into the U.S., that same item to come back into the United States right now. We're talking thousands of dollars to pay once it lands here in the United States. And we're sort of going, phew. Yeah. But what if you're somebody who is expecting to bring in something I'm talking about consumers, not even talking about businesses.
Right.
It's a problem.
You're not going to do it, right? If there's something that doesn't fit in your budget and you can push that out, you're going to see that happen, especially when it comes to things like redecorating or renovations. I mean, that's something that has home builders really concerned.
All right, Kelly O'Grady. Always great having you here, especially when there's breaking news like this. Appreciate it, Kerry. All right, just yesterday, President Trump was touting his administration's economic successes at a rally in Michigan. That was, of course, before the numbers we saw this morning. The president said it had been, quote, the most successful 100 days of any administration in the history of the country, close quote. Let's go to CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi for more on this. Okay, Olivia, so the numbers this morning would suggest that that is not accurate. How is the president reacting to the GDP numbers of this morning?
Well, good morning, Vlad. It's good to be with you. Obviously, these numbers are a little disappointing to this White House that ran on the economy. We are hearing from the president, though, this morning specifically about the stock market in relation to the bad numbers he says that are coming out. He said this morning, this is Biden's stock market, not Trump's. I didn't take over till January 20th. Tariffs will soon start kicking in and companies are starting to move into the USA in record numbers. Our country will boom, but we have to get rid of the Biden overhang. This will take a while and has nothing to do with tariffs, only that he left us with bad numbers, ending it with be patient. Now, obviously, this is the spin coming from the White House. We've seen time and time again that when the stock market is doing well, Trump will claim credit. He did it even when he was on the campaign trail, not in office, and the stock market was doing well. He said it was in response to people being excited for him coming back into office. Now with the stock market reacting to the GDP news, which from what we've seen so far, looks like they're taking it in stride. He is saying this is not his numbers. These are Biden overhang numbers, and therefore to be patient with him as they're still working out all of these tariff negotiations.
Except that the president's inaccurate. The stock market during the 4 years that President Biden was in office was in record territory. And even if there was some excitement over the potential of a second Trump administration, at best, the market would see a couple of days of positive numbers, not the sustained growth that we saw. The drivers of the stock market are, of course, corporate earnings, consumer confidence, and GDP. And right now, GDP is, as you heard earlier from Kelly O'Grady, we haven't seen a number like this in at least a number of years. So as the president continues to double down on the economy today, let's talk about these top executives who are at the White House and at a cabinet meeting. What do you know about that?
Well, today is about touting the deals that the White House has made. We heard about immigration on Monday, economics and trade deals and tariffs yesterday. Now, today, Trump is going to host a few CEOs here at the White House to talk about their economic investments in the United States. So just to name a few that will be here, NVIDIA CEO, Johnson & Johnson CEO, Eli Lilly, SoftBank, and GE Aerospace, just to name a few that the White House gave us. They say much more are going to be here. We asked for who. They said wait and see. Important to note, though, of the people who will be here, NVIDIA announced that joint project with OpenAI, remember, a couple months ago. It was a $500 billion investment to AI infrastructure development here in the United States. Johnson & Johnson said they would announce a $55 billion investment in manufacturing and research and development of drugs. Same with Eli Lilly, about $27 billion of investment. So all these people are coming here today at the request of the White House, an invitation to them to celebrate these investments and rebuilding America as Trump wants to. Of course, the GDP and the economic news today, there's more economic news that we're expected to get, might overhang those meetings. Also today, in a little bit, we're going to have a fifth cabinet meeting from Trump so far of this, his 101 days in office, rather. And there's a lot for them to chew on, not only on the economic deals and the tariff fronts, but also think about that deal with Ukraine that Trump said he'd be able to get on day one. So there's a lot on the plate here at the White House today, Vlad.
Hey, Olivia, before you go, we had Ed O'Keefe earlier on CBS Mornings. We asked him about that conversation the president had with Jeff Bezos regarding the reporting that perhaps Amazon was going to place on some of their products, the price of the product versus the price that it costs with those tariffs in effect. Which is kind of interesting because on one hand, the president is saying, no, prices aren't going to go up. But hey, if you tell people prices are going up, I'm going to make a phone call and make sure you don't let the American people know. What can you tell us about that call?
Well, we know they spoke yesterday, and there was a little bit of he said, she said. So this reporting had come out that Amazon was going to put like a tariff price tracker. You know, when you're checking out and you can see what the discount deal was, well, they were going to add maybe a little line that said what the tariff price was going to cost on this specific product. That got swift reaction from the White House. Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, called it a hostile and political act of them doing that. Amazon quickly said, no, it's not on all products. It's just on their Amazon Haul storefront that they were thinking about it. And if you've seen what Amazon Haul is, it's kind of like Temu, which is the TikTok, cheap goods shop. Cheap goods from China. So they said, we were thinking about it, but now we're not thinking about it. The president had a call with Jeff Bezos specifically about it. He said they're all good. So, Vlad, on that front, it seems like they avoided any issues on tariff pricing and consumers and that being realized. So.
Also on that front, Olivia, I learned what Amazon Haul was this morning. I had no idea what that was. Thank you very much, my friend. Appreciate you as always. All right, let's turn to those latest on deportations. The president has suggested he could call the leader of El Salvador to have mistakenly deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia returned back to the United States. But during an interview yesterday, the president claimed it was not up to him to bring Garcia back. Listen.
The order from the Supreme Court stands, sir.
Came into our country illegally.
You could get him back. There's a phone on this desk.
I could.
You could pick it up, and with all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, send him back right now.
And if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that.
But the court has ordered you to facilitate that.
I'm not the one making this decision. We have lawyers that don't want to do this.
But the buck stops in this office.
No. I follow the law.
So I guess the buck doesn't stop with him, as the president just suggested. Let's bring in CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman to talk more about this. So, Katrina, just for our audience to understand, is there any legal reason that would bar the president of the United States from calling El Salvador's president to bring Mr. Garcia back to the United States? Does the president of the United States have that authority?
Vlad, there's nothing to my knowledge that would legally stop President Trump from calling President Bukele and discussing this with him. The court cannot order President Trump to tell another foreign leader what to do in his own country. However, there are a few things here, Vlad. For one, President Trump is the one who sent Mr. Abrego Garcia to El Salvador. He's also paying them to keep him in prison along with all of these other men that were deported on a plane there. So, there is a strong relationship between him and President Bukele. We saw that when they met at the White House recently. At the time, President Bukele said he couldn't send a terrorist back to the United States. But regarding those lawyers that Trump was referring to, the judge in that case has ordered them to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia. She has been asking them to show her the steps that are being taken to do so. And yes, ultimately, as far as I know, there's nothing that would stop him from picking up that phone.
All right, and let's talk about this. You might have seen DHS Secretary Kristi Noem spoke exclusively to CBS News. She told my co-host Tony DeCopel that the department is following the president's orders. I want to play a little bit of what she said.
He is not under our control. He is an El Salvador citizen. He is home there in his country. If he were to be brought back to the United States of America, we would immediately deport him again.
So I can understand that the DHS secretary obviously doesn't have the power that the executive branch has, the president. He also, as you know, Katrina, doubled down on having to get criminals out fast and questioned whether the United States can hold deportation hearings. What does the law say about that?
I mean, people are entitled to notice and a hearing in general, Vlad, regarding Mr. Abrigo Garcia, for example, and all of these men who have been deported under the Alien Enemies Act. Even the Supreme Court has said that notice and an opportunity to contest that removal is required. There are some exceptions where expedited removal can take place if someone has come in illegally and been in the country for less than 2 years. However, there are exceptions here. For one, they can claim that they think they'll be persecuted if they're deported from the United States. You also can't do this to someone who's a lawful permanent resident, someone who already has a protected status here, someone who is seeking asylum, and to minors as well, Vlad.
All right, Katrina Kaufman, always great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to the war in Ukraine, where President Volodymyr Zelensky says that Russia launched more than 100 drones in an overnight attack on the country, killing at least one person and injuring dozens more. This as both sides are talking about what it would take to get a ceasefire. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio is following developments from London and joins us now. So, Ramy, what more can you tell us about these overnight attacks?
Hey, Vlad. Yeah, well, another night of attacks, fear, loss in Ukraine. Ukrainian officials said that swarms of Russian drones hit the country's second largest city. That's Kharkiv in Ukraine's northeast near the Russian border, along with south in Dnipro, which is Ukraine's fourth largest city. And we've got a dash cam video that shows one of those drone strikes in Kharkiv. The driver of this car here, you can see it right there. The explosion happens in front of him, the driver, and makes this U-turn, a quick U-turn, and going the other way. The mayor of Kharkiv also said that high-rise apartment blocks had been hit, along with private homes, a medical facility, and civilian infrastructure. Ukraine's top military commander also says that Russia has significantly increased the intensity of their attacks on eastern Ukraine, even as we've been talking about Putin announcing a 3-day ceasefire, which, if it happens, is set for next week. Volodymyr Zelensky, the president, said that these attacks really show why pressure is needed on Russia to end the war. And you might read into that as a nod into how he, and for sure many Ukrainians, feel with President Trump's change in American support since he became president.
But the pressure that Volodymyr Zelensky is asking for, Ramy, we saw it. The president sent a strongly worded Truth Social post to Vladimir Putin urging him to stop. Vladimir, stop. But we're continuing to see these attacks. So are we seeing any movement? I know you're saying that there might be one potentially next week, but what more can you tell us about some of the strings that may be attached to that?
Sure. Well, words are one thing. Ukraine, many people want to see action, right? We're keeping tabs on a breakthrough possibly happening today. We've been following this, and perhaps in the next few hours this might happen. Ukraine reportedly ready to sign that natural resources deal with the U.S., which we've been discussing, which we've been reporting on for the past few months. This is coming from the Kyiv Independent as well as from the BBC, our partners, which reports that a final deal appears to be a 50-50 investment infrastructure project. Now, if this happens, it would give the U.S. Privileged access to things like aluminum, graphite, oil, natural gas. And then there's another layer to this. The Trump administration has dropped its demand that Ukraine pay for all of the past few years of past U.S. military support through this deal, something on the order of tens of billions of dollars. Now it just appears to be on the hook for future military support. So we're looking out for those lines. But as you said, words are one thing, or Truth Social posts are one thing, but they have to really follow through to make sure that there is some kind of action.
100%. Ramy Inocencio, always great to have you, my friend. Appreciate you.
Of course.
All right, weather now. Powerful storms rip through the middle of the country, bringing heavy rains and flash flooding. We'll have your national forecast next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Strong storms in Pittsburgh have killed at least one person. Power was knocked out for hundreds of thousands of homes. Pittsburgh's mayor is providing an update right now. Let's listen.
Well, we know an individual lost their life. And I want to say, from my administration to his family, we're praying for you, the friends. I know this is a difficult time, and I just want to extend my condolences to the family, and I also want to make sure that we're praying for the family and friends. I also want to honor the dedication and bravery of our first responders, including those last night in the fire department who were injured in the line of duty. One was treated at the scene and released. The other was transported in stable condition. It was a tough storm last night, and our first responders was injured and we lost a life in the city. I would like the city to take a moment of silence.
All right, that was the mayor of Pittsburgh. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Grant, good morning. Not good news in western Pennsylvania.
No, it was a ferocious storm that really ripped through eastern Ohio, and then it moved into western Pennsylvania, and it continued across at least half of the state yesterday before finally weakening before arriving in eastern PA in the Philadelphia area. Look at some of these wind gusts. This is what we've seen across the country over the last 48 hours, including here in Lawson Heights, Pennsylvania, which is really close to Pittsburgh. 79-mile-per-hour wind gusts there, but elsewhere across the country, up in Seymour, Texas, 106-mile-per-hour wind gusts. All the storms that moved through the Northeast yesterday have since dissipated, but we are beginning to see more storms redevelop. Look at this across the country. Over 646 wind damage reports over the last 24 hours, and there are more on the way, already developing across the central and southern United States. And this is where we are expecting for the threat for more severe storms, specifically hail and damaging winds again later today. This is an enhanced threat for severe storms that will then begin to develop and move to the east as we go throughout the day today. Let's drop the map here and let's talk about the forecast as we go through the next couple of days, because it's not just damaging winds, hail, and that threat for a tornado, but also an increasing threat for flash flooding. Let's put this into motion. Let's time it out for you as we go throughout the day. That complex of storms moves into the mid and southern Mississippi Valley as we go into early tomorrow morning. A lot more heavy rain tracking to the north. But again, some places could pick up 4, 5, 6 inches of rain, and that may result in flash flooding. These storms regenerate as we go into the day tomorrow. A level 2 out of 5, a slight risk for severe storms, moves into the eastern half of the United States. That leads us towards the weekend. But again, flash flooding, Vlad, is the main concern across the central and southern U.S. over the next couple of days. Back to you for now.
Oh, boy. All right. Grant Gilmore for us. Thank you, Grant. A key witness in the Karen Reed murder trial is returning to the stand in Massachusetts today. Karen Reed is accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend in January 2022. Her first trial ended with a hung jury. CBS News Boston reporter Penny Commit has more.
So Jen McCabe is who the defense says is essentially the mastermind behind Karen Reed being framed. Yesterday, she had the chance to start and tell her side of the story, but later today it will be the defense's turn. And trust me, those two stories really could not look more different. So who is Jen McCabe? Her sister is Nicole Albert, who's married to Brian Albert, and that couple is who owned the home 34 Fairview Road where John O'Keefe's body was found on the front lawn. Jen McCabe was around for almost everything following John O'Keefe's death. She says that she invited Karen and John to the after party. They were all out drinking, but Karen and John never showed up. She also said that Karen called her the next morning in hysterics, and the two of them went looking for John together. They did eventually find his body at 34 Fairview Road. Now, Jen has said that the two of them, John and Karen, never went inside of the home, that no fights happened that night, that she didn't see them after the bar. But the defense, totally different story. Their theory is that John did go inside of the home that night and was beaten, and that's how he died, not by Karen Reed hitting him with her car. So that's why Jen McCabe's testimony is so important. She also had that Google search we've talked a lot about, Haas Long to Die in Cold. There's been a lot of debate on when exactly she made that Google search. Was it before John O'Keefe's body was discovered, meaning that she knew that he was dead, or was it after? So her testimony going to make for a very important day in court today. Last time when she testified during the first trial, it was so incredibly tense, and that's honestly putting it lightly. So we're expecting a lot of spark inside of the courtroom, let's say, today. Back to you.
All right, Penny, thank you very much. You can watch gavel to gavel coverage of the trial on CBS News Boston. More news coming up. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you this morning. The victims in that deadly car crash at an after-school program in Illinois have been identified. Police say 2 7-year-olds and an 8-year-old, along with an 18-year-old, were killed when a woman crashed into the victims before driving through a building. 44-year-old Marion Akers is not in police custody, and police do not believe it was a targeted attack. Harvard University President Alan Garber is apologizing to students and faculty after a new report criticized the school's response to anti-Semitism and Islamophobia on campus. The report included testimony from students who said they felt pressured to hide their identity from other students and faculty. In a letter, Garber says, quote, "I'm sorry for the moments we failed to meet the high expectations we rightfully set for our community." And the Wisconsin Supreme Court has suspended a judge accused of helping a man evade immigration authorities. Milwaukee County Circuit Judge Hannah Dugan was arrested by the FBI on Friday on multiple federal charges, including obstruction or impeding a proceeding. The court says it was acting on its own initiative and not responding to a request from anyone. Liberal justices control the court by a margin of 4-3. All right, Congress is back in session this week with 2 different priorities. GOP leaders are focused on passing a spending bill to carry out the president's agenda. Meanwhile, Democrats are calling for a new blueprint for America. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is set to deliver remarks in a matter of moments to detail that plan. CBS News Congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins us with more on that. Nicole, what is this blueprint for America that Minority Leader Jeffries is touting?
Well, it's really more of a vision, if you will, for the path forward as far as Democrats and how they see it than an actual, bullet point by bullet point plan. I mean, look, I think the minority leader has been clear in trying to convey that he understands certainly the frustrations that a lot of Democrats have out there. And what he told reporters earlier this week is that in response to some criticism about whether Democrats are doing enough to combat the Trump agenda, he said that they view this moment as a more is more environment in terms of trying to do more town halls. We, of course, saw the leader doing that sit-in with Cory Booker on the Capitol steps over the weekend. So really kind of all hands on deck, doing everything they can possible to try to combat the president's agenda. Same as far as Leader Schumer is concerned, too. So that is why you will see both leaders on the Capitol steps a bit later today, where they will once again kind of reaffirm this commitment on the part of Democrats to continue fighting the administration tooth and nail.
And let me ask you about this vow from Democrats to keep pushing back aggressively on key issues. Senate Democrats, as you know, Nicole, marked the 100 days of the Trump presidency with marathon speeches last night. I want to play some of that.
There's a cabal of very greedy people who run the White House. They're rich. They have no understanding of what average Americans go through. And they plunder the government and then slash programs that we so desperately need for average families, all for tax cuts for the rich.
So, Nicole, the question, of course, is how are their constituents, how is the party responding to what the Democrats are saying? I mean, it feels at this point that they're ineffective, and that's why there's been, as you know, and you've reported on this, talk of leadership changes as we head into the midterms.
Yeah, well, again, I think that's why you're seeing both leaders try to get out in front of this as best they can, whether it is taking to the Senate floor in terms of Senate Democrats, or again, as we mentioned earlier with the minority leader, taking these new approaches as far as doing that sit-in. What I can say in terms of Leader Schumer, he is particularly today taking aim at the president with respect to the economy and those new GDP numbers that are out this morning showing slight contraction within the economy. The leader is saying that this is yet another example of, in his view, what he believes are the president's failed policies, and that he should fire his entire economic team. He says that today's numbers show that Donald Trump is running America the same way he ran his businesses, straight into the ground. So we do expect a vote later today in the Senate actually on a resolution to potentially nullify the president's tariffs, although at this point it's unlikely to get a lot of Republican support.
All right, so let's talk about some of the leadership challenges that the GOP is facing as they prepare this final draft of that spending bill. When is that vote set to happen, Nicole?
Well, it's not going to happen this week. Right now, Republicans are in the markup stage of this bill on the House side, so each committee is tasked with kind of writing a portion of this bill and also coming up with savings in order to pay for the president's tax cuts and other initiatives that are part of this plan. So that is what is going to be taking place over the next couple of weeks, with the Speaker hoping to get it out of his chamber by Memorial Day.
Okay, Nicole Killian first on the Hill. Thank you, Nicole. We've got breaking news to share with you as we are on the air right now. It's in the case of Mohsen Mahdawi. He is the Columbia University student who was taken into custody by ICE at what was supposed to be a citizenship interview in Vermont. He is speaking right now. Let's listen.
I love you too. I've always learned that home is where you feel safe and loved. And those who surround you there are your people, and you are my people. Vermont, and if you don't know the history of Vermont, you should look up the Underground Railroads to know what Vermont is. If you don't know Vermont, you need to search the history of the civil rights movement and the anti-Vietnam War to understand what Vermont is. In Vermont, we have the people and the representatives, Democrats and Republicans, spiritual people and intellectual people all come together to say, the people united will never be defeated. 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 And from this place, in front of this court, me standing here in front of you, me standing here with you, among you, sends a clear message. It sends a message that is loud and clear, not only to the Vermonters, but to the rest of America. And the message is, we the people will hold the Constitution accountable for the principles and values that we believe in. That's right. And we send a clear message as well, that if we have faith in our beliefs, unshakable beliefs, which is the belief that justice is inevitable, we will not fear anyone, because our fight is a fight for love, is a fight for democracy, is a fight for humanity. Amen.
All right, you've been listening to Mohsen Mahdawi, who has now been released by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. He is in Vermont at this rally here in Burlington. He was arrested, you'll recall, just about 2 weeks ago on April 14th. He was on his way to a meeting with the folks that he's supposed to meet with regularly. And he was, according to his lawyers, duped into coming into that meeting. Lawyer was taken out of the room and he was arrested and handcuffed. So our Lily Luciano is actually in Burlington, Vermont. She's been reporting on this case almost from the beginning. So when we get an opportunity to chat with her, she's probably going to want to try to get a chat with him, because she has been in contact with him. She was in contact with him up until the moment he was arrested. So if I know Lilia, she's definitely angling for an interview or at least a statement from Mahdawi. So if we get that, we'll turn it around to you and bring it to you right here on CBS News 24/7. Meanwhile, we'll be right back. You are streaming CBS News 24/7. The Supreme Court will take up a case today that could open the door to the first federally funded religious charter school in the nation. Critics say plans to open a Catholic charter school in Oklahoma would violate the Constitution. So I want to bring in CBS News contributor Jessica Levinson, who will break this case down and explain to us why, for so many folks, they're saying, Jessica, that this is potentially one of the biggest challenges that the court is facing right now in trying to figure this out. What can you tell us?
Well, Vlad, I remember you and I have been talking about this tension between the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause, two different clauses in the First Amendment that protect religious rights for years now. And I think this is the court having inched for years now, since about 2017, to saying we are going to be very protective of people who say my Free Exercise Clause rights are being violated. And potentially some of the liberal justices are saying potentially to the detriment of the Establishment Clause. Of course, the Establishment Clause says that you cannot establish an official government religion. The Free Exercise Clause says we have to protect people in their exercise of their religion and their religious activities. So here we have in Oklahoma people who want to set up, as you said, the nation's first online Catholic charity that would be Catholic school that would be a charter school, direct federal funding. And the question is, does that violate the Establishment Clause, or does not allowing that actually violate some people's Free Exercise Clause rights? It's a real tension between those two clauses.
It's hard for me to understand as somebody who's not a lawyer, which I understand the Establishment Clause very well, and yet I understand the fact that people want to be able to exercise their religious freedom. But does the government, or should the government fund that religious freedom, is the question that I have, Jessica.
And that's the question that the justices have. I mean, Vlad, you've zeroed in on it exactly. So we have since, as I said, 2017, we've had a court say that when it comes to indirect federal funding, one of the first cases I think you and I talked about was whether or not you could use government funds to pave the playground in a religious preschool. The court said, well, that's okay, that's indirect. And then what about vouchers? What about vouchers for religious schools? The court said, well, that's okay, that's indirect. But now we're getting to a place where it's potentially direct funding. And what those arguing in favor of the charter school have said is, well, look at all these places where you've said, if we're funding non-religious schools, then we can fund religious schools at the same time. And it might even undermine people's ability to exercise their religious rights if you're picking and choosing, meaning you're picking non-sectarian schools over religious schools.
Fascinating. Jessica Levinson, always great to have you provide that clarity that we sorely need. Appreciate it. All right. Let's show you some celebrations happening in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, of course, marking 50 years since the end of that war. There's a new documentary series called Turning Point, the Vietnam War, and it takes an extensive look at the conflict and the impact it has had on modern history. Here's a preview featuring some of the extraordinary coverage at the time from CBS News. Watch.
Walter Cronkite was managing editor and anchor of the CBS Evening News, one of, at the time, 3 major networks. More than anybody else on the air television, he was seen as a trusted source. He had demonstrated time and time again that he wasn't trying to sell anything illogically or politically. After the Tet Offensive, his correspondents, including this one, had time after time told him, Walter, this is not going well. Cronkite finally said, well, I want to go to Vietnam and see for myself.
Tonight, Report from Vietnam by Walter Cronkite.
If the communist intention was to take and seize the cities, they came closer here at Hue than anywhere else. The destruction here was almost total. There's scarcely an inhabitable building in the city of Hue.
The boss at CBS News at the time was a very strict journalism devotee and would not permit any of us to ever do anything like an editorial comment at all. But now I came back and suddenly he said, you know what? we may have a responsibility here we haven't recognized. I think you, Cronkite, ought to do a piece saying just exactly what you think about the situation out there. And so I sat down and wrote my piece.
We have been too often disappointed by the optimism of the American leaders, both in Vietnam and Washington, to have faith any longer in the silver linings they find in the darkest clouds. For it seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate. It is increasingly clear to this report that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victors, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could. This is Walter Cronkite. Good night.
He didn't say we're losing the war. What he said was, it's a standoff. The U.S. forces can't prevail here. The fact that Walter Cronkite would say this directly made a big impact.
Lyndon Johnson is reported to have said, if I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America.
Walter Cronkite admitted the obvious, that our soldiers were dying for nothing.
Of course, the reason that this documentary is called Turning Point is because in the wake of Walter Cronkite's historic editorial commentary there, Lyndon Johnson, the president of the United States at the time, suggested that this was a turning point in the Vietnam War, which ultimately led to the fall of Saigon and the end of the U.S. involvement in Southeast Asia. And you saw Dan Rather there sort of providing a textbook definition of what we do as journalists, which is, and it's what Walter did. He went to Vietnam to see with his own eyes, based on the reporting that some of our courageous correspondents, including Dan Rather, had seen themselves with their own eyes of our young men and women who were dying in this conflict. Turning Point, the Vietnam War, is produced by See It Now Studios. You can catch the entire 5-part series beginning tonight on Netflix. We've got a look at your national forecast just coming up. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. We're following some breaking news out of Vermont, where we told you earlier that Mohsen Mahdawi has been released from immigration custody following his arrest at what was supposed to be a citizenship interview that happened back April 14th. Now, Mahdawi's lawyers say he was effectively tricked when he was detained at that hearing. They threw him up against the wall after they told his lawyer to step out of the room to sign some documents. They locked the door and then handcuffed Mahdawi. Now, a U.S. District Court judge, his name is Jeffrey Crawford, said that the time that the Columbia University student has spent in detention demonstrate great harm to a person who has been charged with no crime. As we pointed out earlier, our Lilia Luciano is on the scene in Burlington, Vermont, and if there is any news and any moment that she can get with Mahdawi, we'll turn that around for you and bring it to you over the next couple hours right here on CBS News 24/7. Meanwhile, let's get a last look at the national forecast with Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore. Grant.
Hey, Vlad, yeah, tracking more severe weather again today across the central and southern United States, where we have the slight risk for severe storms. So tracking the threat for damaging winds, large hail, and flash flooding. Cooler up across the Midwest into the northeastern states today after the cold front that moved through that produced the severe weather across western Pennsylvania into the Pittsburgh area. Meanwhile, more showers over the northern and parts of the Great Basin, but still dry and pleasant across the southwest, all up along the west coast. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Grant, thank you very much. Folks, that does it for me, but stay right where you are after the break. Mugo Odiwe is live from San Francisco with all the news breaking from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.